Doc, is it possible that I'm attracted to these negative people? You would not believe how many times I've been asked that specific question. It might be that somebody's coming in for relationship issues, recent breakup, or they're having trouble with their partner. But sometimes it's even more like just, I feel like these people come up to me at work. These are the friendships I'm in. It's like these folks are magnets for people that are doing the exact opposite of what they need. Does this sound like you? Because if it does, I think you will want to keep listening today. Welcome. This is how to fix your sucky life. That's right. Maybe you're somebody who says, so life sucks. Now what? Right? Fix me, Doc. I don't know what to do with all of this. This is a podcast that teaches anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about how to get control of the anxiety in their life, the stress in their life, all of those feelings that are bogging you down. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie Marr, a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a trauma therapist. And I'm here to help you understand how things early in our life, things like trauma or really difficult times, impact us later in life, so much so that it drives us off course and into patterns that are not helping us. They don't serve us and they create suffering for us. And there's a lot of information swimming out there. So I know that people are looking to feel better and want to know what works. Why don't we help you fix that sucky life? I take all of the information from neuroscience, my experience over the last 2 decades, and all the fits and starts of my own personal life, and I put it all together in a toolbox for you so that you can stop just surviving and learn how to really thrive in your life. I know it's possible to get there, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. This is my inaugural podcast, my very first one. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me today. And I'm guessing that little hook in the beginning is something that you were intrigued about. And so you have the question for me too, Doc. Is it possible that I'm actually attracted to these negative people? Is it possible that I somehow magnetize them to myself? I don't get it. Why? Why am I always fighting myself surrounded by these idiots, right? Like that's how it feels. And by the time you're sitting across the couch from me, you are exasperated with this, right? So let me give you kind of an example. Right? And this is not any particular client that I've had specifically. It's more of a summarization of many, many clients that I've had come in. But they come in and I'm doing their initial intake. And if you've never been to therapy before, let me demystify the process for you. For those of us that are going to give you a diagnosis, use your health insurance and get reimbursed from your health insurance, we're going to have a diagnosis that shows it's medically necessary for us to be serving you. So that initial session is pretty much all questions. We've probably had you fill out a big old intake packet. And now we're going to go through all of those symptoms that you've told us about. And, for somebody like me who's a trauma therapist, I'm also going to kind of dig in to some of your history. So I'll just ask you things like, well, tell me a little bit about growing up, and you'll give me that background. So for an example like this one, where somebody feels like they've attracted across their lifetime negative people to themselves, or they're asking me like, is that a thing? Like, am I really just attracting these folks to myself? Then what I'm asking for and what I'm listening for as they're talking to me is whether or not there is some truth to that, right? So I'll ask them like, what was it like growing up? And then they'll talk about those relationships. And well, oh my gosh, that usually kind of dives into some other trail. Maybe it's telling me about their relationships, telling me about their friendships, things about how they've noticed this pattern show up. And it might be something like this. So they've had some relationships in their life where they notice there's some synchronicity here. Maybe it's the boyfriend that they had in high school, and that boyfriend was really aloof and kind of an ass. Let's be real. Like, was worried about being popular, was worried about, fitting into his in crowd. And so really kind of pushed you into maybe sexual experiences before you wanted to, or, asked you to kind of push your boundaries a little bit, or just like made you chase them. Right? Was always aloof, but you were doing the chasing. So it could have shown up like that. Later in life, maybe in college, you did some investigating. You wanted to know, do I want boyfriends? Do I want girlfriends? So maybe you tried a few things. Maybe you tried a few kind of relationships. But this pattern showed up again. What you realized is you were like living with your first live-in partner, and they also were really like, they had boundaries around, I need to be doing my own thing and my life isn't to take care of you. And yet, like, every time you were asking for a little bit of extra from them, they weren't filling any of those needs. And they might have even kind of diminished your asking about it. And so then, over time you just backed off. You didn't want to ask about it at all anymore. So you're kind of, a couple years in maybe, and it just results in a breakup because it's not enough. But you're pretty young and you're ready to go back out there, and you do. And, maybe by the time you hit my couch, you've been talking to me about how there's been a series of these kinds of relationships where you feel like you're the chaser. And those people, like, in the beginning, it feels amazing. You fall in love. They're very invested in you. And you're always hoping to get back to that part. But by the time you get into the actual meat of what relationships are, which is to learn how to cohabitate, right? How to integrate lives together and still kind of interdependently also have your own life. What happened is you just kept diving in, trying to please this person, and this person just wasn't there for you. Now, I've had that scenario in a myriad of examples across the time that I've worked for the last 2 decades. And oftentimes they will be one of the people that ask me, Doc, do I attract these folks to me? Because, like, in the beginning, it doesn't feel that way. It seems different. But in the meat of the relationship, I'm not getting my needs met, and then I want to move on. And you may even later in your life start to stick around in those relationships for longer periods of time because you kind of feel like biological clocks are ticking. And gosh, I don't know if I have enough time to put in the work of a dating relationship and starting all over and getting to living together and eventually deciding whether or not we're going to commit in a monogamous relationship going forward. So I've had that example. And it oftentimes ends in them asking me about this. Now, there's also another group of people that might ask this of me. So these folks are folks that, talk to me a little bit more about how early in life, they were the person everybody wanted to be around. like early in life, they have great stories from high school. College was a blast, early 20s. Time of their life. And yet, what no one else knew, but I get to know because I have that psychological safe space of therapy with them, is that they had a horrible insecurity about being enough. A horrible insecurity about it, right? They were always comparing themselves. They were always like worried, am I pretty enough? Am I fit enough? Am I smart enough? Am I successful enough? Enough. Like that theme just regurgitated itself in so many different ways. So they're here sitting across the couch from me, and then how it sometimes comes up for them later in life is sometimes it is in their relationships, but it's more like, I just feel like relationships are work. Like I'm always, on, even with my partner, like I never have any downtime because then I come home and I have to be on. And, really worried about the mask. They might even find themselves caught in some scenarios where they haven't been completely honest with their partners. And it probably started kind of like a little white lie, right? Kind of started as, I just didn't want them to know this part of me because I was afraid gosh, if they knew this, they'd like me less, or God forbid, they might actually want to break up with me. So I just didn't talk about it. But now, like, I have to hide that. I have to hide that aspect of myself and hide that part of my life. And I just don't feel enough in this relationship. And that starts to erode at them. So they're across the couch from me. And now they're asking, am I just attracted to these people that never will just let me be my authentic self? Am I just attracting people, Doc, that, I'm hustling and hustling, but it never seems enough to them, right? So they're at that stage now in relationships where they're even kind of growing a bit resentful because they are putting in a ton of work with their partners and being on all the time and having the mask up, and the partners aren't liking them as much, and that's becoming evident in arguments and lack of closeness and connection, and it isn't serving all their needs in the relationship. And so now they're like, oh, I put in all this time, and I was so worried that I wasn't going to be enough in the beginning. And now, no matter what I do, it's not enough. And, it's happened to me again. How did I get caught here again, Doc? How is it possible? Or am I attracted to these people? So these are a couple really great examples of how possibly our blueprints, that's what I'll call them, blueprints or our maps in our brain for how to be in relationships has now impeded our ability to actually gain anything from our relationships as adults to the full capacity that we want, right? And some of these clients are not as distressed as others. However, there is, you're across the couch from me, so something's up, right? Something about it isn't meeting your needs, isn't working for you. And it's an interesting question, really. Is it possible I'm doing something? And it usually doesn't come until a little bit, closer to late 20s, 30s, 40s. I mean, it depends on the individual. It depends on how many of these relationships they've noticed. But honestly, there has to be a certain amount of times this has happened to be reflecting back and thinking, maybe this is a pattern, and maybe in the pattern, I'm the common denominator. And Doc, tell me, am I attracted to these people? Now, the catch-22 for me on my side of the couch is you don't want to know. You don't want to know that you're the one that's creating this problem. If I say it to you in that way, now some people think they want to hear that, but that's a pretty big, heavy punch. And to be quite honest, the science doesn't support that. It's not 100% true. There are things that you are doing that keep you in these dances, in these types of relationships. That is absolutely true. And that is absolutely what I would zero in on. So let me tell you today a little bit about kind of what is a psychologist's point of view of how you would handle that question and what kinds of things I recommend when people find themselves in that quandary. So first of all, what I investigate here is relationships with parents, with safe adults in your early childhood, and I'm looking for this pattern at some soft level that showed up earlier. Now, for some people, I'm a trauma therapist, so some people that's an actual trauma. Sometimes it's not, though. Sometimes it's much less. It seemed like less, but I want you to remember that children are not the most resourced of all of us, right? They can't handle it when they're rejected by the one or two or three people in their life that are supposed to love them no matter what. And when that gets conditional, when their guardians are conditional in their love, when their guardians are underdeveloped emotionally themselves, like they're immature emotionally themselves, when they are suffering in some sort of mental health capacity, or when the situation is one that's, of turmoil, say divorce. And gosh, more than 50% of the marriages, I believe that's still the statistic in America, are going to result in that. And so a lot of kids are experiencing this. I'm looking for this pattern when it first originated. That's the kind of therapist that I am. And what we'll dig through is kind of better understanding how originally in a child's mind it made sense to develop the things that you're doing in your present relationships that's no longer serving you. Now, with that first example, the person that's always chasing, the person who's like, feels the person on the other side, feels their partners on the other side are flat or not invested in the relationships or putting up firm boundaries. And so they're always anxious in these relationships and leaning in and wanting more. The more they do that, the more these partners pull back. This can often be drawn back to attachment theory. Now, if you haven't heard about attachment theory, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the science for you today, but there are secure attachments, adults that kind of feel pretty secure and can handle a certain amount of distress in their relationships. And that's usually created in a family system where the guardians or those original safe adults were giving them enough, right? Giving them enough love. The love wasn't completely conditional, and they always felt loved. They might have had some conditions on their behavior, right? Parents can love the kid and not the tantrums, but they always felt loved. They always felt like their family had their back. You didn't come from that environment, then you have an insecure attachment. And there's, some different variations of that. Originally, it was anxious, avoidant, and a mixed version of that. So anxious, avoidant. And now, as that was kind of in the early 60s. And now as we've moved on, we have a few more ways of looking at. Disorganized is one of the words that'll come up if you Google attachment styles. But the type of attachment style that I'm referring to is this cat and mouse game that can happen when you've got an anxious attached partner, an avoidant attached partner. The anxiously attached partner seeks the validation of the other to make sure that they are still connected. And the more the other sets limits, even that are healthy limits, the more activated they get, right? The more they think, oh, something's wrong. Like, oh, they want to go do things by themselves. That must mean they love me less. Now, here's what I want to point out. Nobody's thinking that in their head, not consciously anyway. And if you have that conscious awareness, my bet is you've done some therapy and you're able to kind of pivot through that. Because once you see yourself being a little bit more irrational in those moments, then change can happen, right? Prior to that, though, you're not aware that you're doing this. And so I am referring to anxiously attached people kind of having these ingrained patterns they're not noticing, where they're always looking for the next shoe to drop, and they're always assuming that anything that's saying that we're not connected is saying, this is the worst thing ever and I better chase them. It's not just, sometimes there are missed ships in the night with my partner. It's the worst case scenario. It creates a threat response. Anxiety is really a body-based illness when you look at it on the mental health spectrum, because it is an illness of the autonomic nervous system. So it is essentially that fight, flight, freeze and fawn response going off at things that normally wouldn't cause that threat response for most people, certainly not for securely attached people. So the anxiously attached person sees any kind of not connectedness as a bad thing, and they keep leaning in. Now, unfortunately, with avoidant styled people, they really are attracted to that in the beginning. In the beginning of a relationship, an avoidant person, they need their independence. They really need to feel like they are not encroached upon. Their experience in childhood was a little bit different. Actually, their experience in childhood, while it might have come from similar circumstances, their response to it was a little bit different. So their response was, if I'm just going to be hurt by people, I'm always going to keep a wall. If I'm just going to get run over anyway, then I'm going to stay a little guarded. And that's how they lean into things. Anxiously attached people chase that affirmation and that validation and want to cling to people. These are the folks that we see as more clingy. Avoidant people want to be loved. Don't get me wrong. They really want to not be rejected and abandoned. But the pattern they're unconsciously playing out is they also keep up kind of an arm's length, right? But early, as in the falling in love phase of a romantic relationship, for that example, but really any relationship, when you're first getting to know someone, even avoidant people are able to kind of, that arm's length comes a little bit closer and they let people in and they see what it's like, right? Here's why. They know eventually they can put that arm back up and will if they start to get a little bit nervous. And here's the problem. They always get nervous. They don't know that that's happening, but they always do. They push back on relationships after a while because their brain, their map or blueprint tells them, guess what? I know this sounds like it's really great right now, but it's gonna mess up. I just want you to know it's going to mess up. So you know what? It's been 3 months. We better start pushing back a little bit. You know what? I saw them doing this. You better push back a little bit. So there's this weird phenomena with anxiously and avoidantly attached people where they're both getting needs met early in the relationship quite well. And then, the threat response that goes off, that alarm that goes off, even when there's not a threat, starts to ring for both of them. And their behaviors in those moments aggravate one another, unfortunately. So they find each other in nature, as it were, because they both like the rush of that falling for one another phase. But once they get to a few months in, whatever, both their nervous systems start to tell them it's been too long and something's going to go wrong. And so they start looking for it. When the anxious person's looking for it, they're leaning in more. They're getting more needy. When the avoidant person is looking for it, they are leaning out. They're like, we need to put up more boundaries. They are encroaching on our space. They are going to hurt us. We don't need that from them. We don't need to be responsible for all those things, right? So that was in my first example. This is the doc. Am I attracting these people? I always feel like I get in the relationship, it's great, and then they start to pull back from me. Now, my second example was, the case of somebody coming in and saying, I have this horrible insecurity that I hide from the world. Like I never tell anybody about it. But everybody loves me. They're always attracted to me. Got into this relationship and, might have had to hide a couple things. Now, I always feel like I have to be on, always have to have my mask on, but I am growing a little resentful because I'm putting in this time and people are still not loving me enough. Like, how am I ever going to be good enough? Doc, do I just attract these people that are never going to appreciate me for who I am? Now, in that case, it's a little bit different, and I don't really even look so much at the attachment style. What I'm looking for there is, why is your worthiness hooked to this relationship? Why is your worthiness hooked to appearing in a certain way, having that mask on? Why is it that you can't just be you? And we'll really start to dig into unpacking then the insecurity piece. What I want to help folks in that little bucket, help them understand, is that most of why they suffer has nothing to do with what's actually going down in those relationships. It has to do with their own thinking and believing about themselves and their world. They have low self-esteem. They have low self-worth. They hustle for their worth. And in that continued pursuit of being good enough in the world, they're never going to attain a relationship where they feel they get enough either. They're always going to play that out somehow in that relationship as well. So, I unpacked both of these cases for you. And now what I want to recommend is something that you could start to do. If you feel like you are somebody that starts to ask yourself, am I attracting these people? Then here's what I want you to do. I want you to assume there is a part of this that is something you're doing that keeps you in lockstep in these patterns of behavior. And instead of being mad at yourself about that, instead of being judgmental with yourself or hard on yourself, I'm going to advise you to do it a little differently. I want you to take a look at yourself and love yourself and watch yourself do all these behaviors. I know that's rough. I know it's hard, but I want you to be compassionate, kind, understanding towards yourself, and curious. and paying attention. Because I am wondering, are you caught in one of these places? Are you feeling more anxiously attached? Are you chasing someone who is pushing away from you because of the neediness that you're presenting? If that's you, that's okay. I want you to be fully aware of that. I want you to be so fully aware of it that you start to see where that's showing up for you, like how it is that you're over interpreting a behavior of your partner. And as you start to recognize that more and more, I want to encourage you to build a new way. Instead of looking for affirmation outside of yourself, how do you build that affirmation inside yourself? You don't need that partner to tell you that you're worthy in this relationship and they love you. You need to love you. They need to take care of them and you need to love you. And when you are fiercely protective of who you are and the value that you bring in those relationships, you're a lot better off in helping yourself make sure that you're not putting up with things that you wouldn't want to. Make sure that you're setting limits with that partner when you're not getting all of your needs met, and be confident that you could find a relationship elsewhere where you would get all those needs met. So you have faith in you, essentially, that you can do this, right? And if you're the person that, it's more of a pattern of just feeling insecure in general, this helps too, right? If you're focused on taking care of who you are as a person, not hustling for your worth, showing up authentically every aspect of your life, and being okay when people aren't okay with that, because the fact that you're worthy is not dependent on their ideas of you. Let me be honest with you. Other people's opinions of us should make no difference. I'm going to say that again. Other people's opinions of us should make no difference. What should always matter is your opinion of yourself. And you should always be striving to focus on loving and taking care of that being. Because I promise, if you always are compassionate and kind and understanding with yourself, you let yourself fail. You may even let yourself fail at full speed, and you're there to catch you. And if all of your attachment issues or insecurities or whatever are out there, but you've got your own back, you suddenly create a foundation on which every other relationship like this is built on that goes a little bit better for you, I have faith in me. I don't have to have trust in the other person necessarily in every aspect. And trust is an interesting thing, because I think what trust in most of our minds means is, well, if I trust this person and they fail me, they have to build that trust again. Not necessarily. You need to have trust with you. That's the important piece of that trust. You need to know that you're going to discern for yourself in every step of your life, is this okay for me? Is this serving me? And then you're going to set boundaries and stand up for yourself when it isn't serving you. And if you do that over and over again, it doesn't matter if somebody makes a mistake in a relationship, you trust you to know, is this a mistake that I'm okay with or not? And if I make a mistake in my discernment of that, then the next time I won't make that mistake. I'm going to stand up fiercely protecting what my worthiness is here and say, listen, you don't get to have access to me then. That's how this is going to go. So I know it sounds a little hippy dippy, but I mean, you're listening to a podcast by a clinical psychologist. My answer to you is, if you think that you are attracting these people in your life, there might be a piece of that that's accurate. There's a way that you're participating. So I want you to stay curious about that. I also want you to stay non-judgmental with yourself. Be kind and compassionate as you see what you see. And then when you feel ready to make a change in the things that you're doing that participate on your side, the thing that I think you need to do first is build your relationship with yourself. Take care of that relationship first. Make sure that you love you authentically, whether or not you do the right thing or not do the right thing, whether or not you're hustling for your worth and look successful on the outside to other people, shouldn't matter. It should matter how you feel towards you. I want you to feel towards you unconditionally that you love yourself. That solves everything. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I need to be sure that you understand this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and it is not a replacement for any mental health or medical therapy, counseling, or other treatments. I also want to be sure that if you are in crisis, that you seek out help. So I'm going to share with you here 2 different resources that you might use for yourself or someone else you know that's close to you in crisis. The first is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can find them at suicidepreventionlifeline.org online, or pick up the phone and dial 988. And you can talk to somebody right away if you're in crisis. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't like to pick up the phone to talk to somebody directly, there is also a crisis text line. You can find them at crisistextline.org online, or you can text HOME to 741-741, and you'll reach somebody right away to help you in crisis. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and I strongly encourage that you like and follow us wherever you find your podcasts. Share us if you like an episode and think somebody could use that information, and certainly leave a review if you feel like there's something that really resonated for you. It helps me when I see those reviews to make sure to have relevant material on the podcast that you want to hear about.